Hey there, people of the interwebs. My name is Brandon Noel. I'm a cartoonist who's been kicking around since '09. Um, Today, all this month, we're talking about DuckTales. Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. So, if you haven't seen the new Disney um, uh, DuckTales series, the pilot is on YouTube for free. Watch it. It is incredible. I've seen that pilot about 5 times now. I paid for the series on iTunes as I do not have cable. Um, and I'm going to be drawing Donald Duck uh, himself this episode or this time around. Um, Now, in the original series from the 80s, I kind of grew up on that series. In the original series, Donald wasn't actually a part of the main cast. And the reason why was the brass at Disney felt it was overexposure of Donald Duck. The same reason why um, Superman and Batman were not on the original Justice League, because they were afraid of overexposure. They didn't want one of their major Disney has, was it the Big Seven or the original Seven? It's like Mickey, Donald, Goofy. See if I can hit them all. Mickey, Donald, Goofy, Daisy, Minnie, Pluto. I'm missing one. I know it's 7. Mickey, Minnie, Daisy, Donald, Goofy, Pluto. I know it's the Big 7. Is it the Big 6? Anyway, they were afraid Donald would be overexposed. You know, they were trying to kind of keep the character downplayed a little bit to kind of to basically to prevent the character from being overexposed and whatnot. But where DuckTales actually comes from is in the 50s. Well, all right, Disney had its own comic book publishing thing going on for a while. Although Donald had his own comic series, Mickey had his own comic series, and then I know there was Mickey and Friends. I actually have some of those. I'm a big fan of collecting those kind of old comics, where basically, you know, it was mixed adventures, and Disney at the time, even though he had nothing to do with the comic books, decided all the books should appear as created by Walt Disney. Even though he didn't even create some of these characters. I forget who it was, but like Goofy wasn't one of his original creations. I mean, they all appeared in Walt Disney cartoons, but some of these characters are not strictly created by Walt. In fact, Ub Iwerks was the guy who really honed Mickey, even in animation. But anyway, what happened was, unfortunately, the artists of those early Disney books weren't given credit. They weren't allowed to basically have their names on the book. and that there this brings in an artist by the name of Carl Barks. And a lot of guys who worked in animation jumped over to the comic line when the animation was dying, and back and forth. Carl Barks is a master at Donald Duck and the Donald Duck comic books. Basically, everyone was concerned over Mickey, and Mickey being the golden goose and that kind of thing. So there was a lot of oversight on the Mickey Mouse comics, where there was no oversight on the Donald Duck comic books. So Carl Barks and a few other artists were basically allowed to create an entire Duck universe that was, for the most part, uncensored, unedited by Walt and the Disney Corporation. They were more concerned with the adventures of Mickey, even though Donald Duck was their highest selling comic book character. In fact, in the 40s, Donald Duck outsold Superman by a couple million, like not even just by a slim margin. Donald Duck was the highest selling comic book character for a long time. And the reason why is because superheroes are kind of attached to America and American culture. It's just what we kind of, it's one of those things that, it is, superheroes are an American creation. So is comic books, for that matter. But what happened was, over in Sweden and Denmark and other places, Donald Duck really hit pretty big. And because it didn't have the baggage of being an American property, it took off pretty strongly. So anyway, Carl Barks had little to no oversight, and I mentioned that the artists' names weren't allowed to be attached to the books. So how do we know what Carl Barks drew? His name's Carl Barks, right? He used to draw a sketch of a little dog to just try to get credit back in the day. So because of that, we actually do know what books he did and what books he worked on, and that's kind of a neat little thing. But anyway, these were Donald Duck books. So the original Donald Duck line, Carl Barks created Scrooge McDuck. That's flat out his creation. He first appears in a Christmas issue, Christmas on Bear Mountain. Really fun read. I have a reprint of it. Fantagraphics a couple of years ago put a lot of like the Carl Barks stuff out, reprints, because Disney, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be interested in their comic book history, even though they just acquired Marvel for $4 billion. So anyway, these characters aren't, yeah. So Donald, like I said, at one point was the highest selling comic book character, and Carl Barks was basically able to create a Duck universe with Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Donald and Scrooge and those kinds of the early proto DuckTales. Oof. Always, always clean your brushes first, kids. So yeah, because of the lack of oversight, the Duck verse and the Scrooge comics and all that, or the Donald Duck comics, basically are the most interesting comic books to come out of Disney. Um, there's a whole backstory, a universe. There's Scrooge McDuck's adventures and all this kind of stuff. And Donald was a part of that in the original series. It was the family dynamic. And then what happened was for the TV series, the original TV series, Donald was taken out for overexposure. They were afraid. Other characters were added in to kind of replace Donald. Um, and in the new series, they brought Donald back into the fold. He's he's now part of the family, part of the main adventure, which I like. I prefer Donald. They put him back in the black sailor outfit, which was his original costume from the comics. Um, and I appreciate that. So there you have it. DuckTales and Donald Duck.